Lesley Barber, composer of Manchester by the Sea. What were your initial thoughts in terms of themes, compositions, when you saw this film for the first time?
Well, I actually started working on the process at the script stage. So I received a script and started working and putting together some themes that were inspired by the script, and then sent those to Kenny, started the collaborative dialogue with him, and then once the film, there was a rough cut or some scenes for me to see, we started sending files back and forth, and music and cuts of the film, and started developing the score from there.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a bit of a classical influence to the music that I got. Can you talk a bit about that, why that was appropriate for the film?
Well, in all of Kenny's pieces, he uses borrowed music, usually from the classical era, and he also has a really he has a real deep knowledge of that, as well as the music from the opera world, and also the music, blues and pop music from different eras. So always when I work with Kenny, I know that there's going to be some of these pieces in place, and I don't really think of it as in a schematic sort of way, but I would imagine that that's in the back of my mind when I'm choosing the kind of music that will support and blend in and unify and be like sort of a gathering storm of meaningful music over the film, over the journey of the film.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the music that you wrote for the film, can you talk about what some of your inspirations were, and making music that would fit appropriately with the rest of the source score in it?
Well, I would imagine in terms of instrumentation, I knew that I wasn't going to be writing sort of a more electronic score or synth-based score, which I really enjoy doing, but I knew that that would be completely wrong. And I also knew that it wouldn't be right for me to write a score that was conventional from a narrative perspective, where I was simply kind of writing some themes that would kind of coast along with the material and underscore. More or less, I had to bring in a new character that had its own life on its own, the way the classical pieces do, so that the whole thing would kind of work together. So one of the things I did is I just after reading the script and felt the impact of the story, like I sat down at the piano and started putting together themes and putting together actually quite finished pieces. So I wrote the piano piece that was then orchestrated and turned into a more orchestral work. And I also wrote the a cappella piece, and I felt like this was right. It was semi-inspired by sort of music that was from the Puritans, the kind of New England 17th century Puritan hymns and psalmody. And I looked at those, and then I tried to put together a theme that somehow tapped into those harmonies. Not really those harmonies, but some of those melodic contours and a kind of looping elliptical quality that was in those pieces that I found interesting, because it sort of had, in a weird way, had a nice mirroring to what Lee's going through in the film. And so, yes, I started demoing those and really sending them as finished pieces. So when I would send things to Kenny, the pieces would already be in a quite finished form.
Mm-hmm. So then, what was possibly the biggest challenge that you had when it came to writing the score? Was there a particular piece or moment in the film that you had a hard time writing music for, or was it all just very easy?
Let me think about that.
Okay.
It's always challenging to score a film, because like until you have something, you have nothing. So there's always this trying to be patient and know that you're going to come up with something better. And so there was that side, but there was a sense of real collaboration, in that I could come up with music, and I came up with some music that we we didn't use, and which happens because I'll write a suite that's sort of based on some of the ideas. So it was interesting to see what worked and what didn't, and sometimes that was a surprise. Some of the scenes were challenging. For instance, when Lee's looking for a job, it was tricky because a lot of it was, I had to sort of not fall into the trap of writing narrative score there. I had to write a piece that would kind of coexist and enhance the meaning of what was going on, but not completely hook into the motion of his walking, his movement, the way you might in another score. I just knew that would be wrong, you know? So with Kenny and I, there was a lot of back and forth on that. Because it almost seems like a conventional montage, but it's not. So I had to resist a kind of montage cue.
Right, right. And I think that brings up a good point about a challenge in writing music for a film like this, I think, is, you know, the trap of overemphasizing the emotion. You know what I mean? Not letting the emotion in the film speak for itself. In other words, you are the one telling people to cry here, laugh here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's sort of completely opposite to the way we want to kind of work together. And I think with You Can Count on Me, we did the same. We brought in a new voice into the score without it leading. You know, it has its own reality, and it doesn't lead the emotions too much. We let the characters in the story do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So like you said, you'd worked on You Can Count on Me, so you've worked with Mr. Lonergan quite a bit. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about what that collaboration is like, and I guess the benefits of working with someone multiple times.
Well, I think, you know, looking back at You Can Count on Me and then working with Kenny again, we have developed a shorthand, but I think more important than that is I think we both really evolved in our filmmaking. And when we first started out with You Can Count on Me, it was for both of us, it was one of our earlier projects. So we were just finding our way with that. And I mean, not to say that it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, because we were both really happy with the results. But there was a kind of thing that I discovered when I was working with Kenny, and that was that sometimes I don't want to share something if I don't think it's really right, even if it comes down to something as simple as I have a piece and I go into the studio with a cellist or someone to work on, for instance, the cello duet in You Can Count on Me, and there was just, and you know, sometimes there's just something quite off with the microphone or just the articulation or the sound, and I can hear it, and sometimes I kind of think that I'm the only one who hears it. But with Kenny, I always know he'll hear it too, and that we can take the time and go back to the studio, or even if there isn't time, that we know it's essential, and re-record things and get the recording right. And I think, you know, when I look at how we've both evolved and we've gone to work with other people and work on all kinds of different projects and then come back together again on this, I felt like that approach could be really stronger, and we could hook into things more quickly and just have that shorthand that happens when you collaborate with someone over a number of pieces.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have worked on a wide variety of different films. I wonder what attracts you to the projects that you take on, other than obviously a paycheck. But
yeah, I like to eat. Yeah,
yeah.
I like to have a new pair of shoes once in a while. But well, I guess looking back, a lot of the pieces I do are character driven, and I like connecting with the central characters, and also traveling with each film, not physically traveling per se, but just traveling into different landscapes of people's lives, and that really draws me. So a lot of the directors and writers that I've worked with, I think they have a similar kind of journey, whether I think of Mira Nair or Wayne Wang or Mary Herron, Boaz Yakin. They all kind of travel to really different places. I guess every film does to some extent, but they're all filmmakers who make music part of their essential language and their filmmaking. So we usually get the time a few weeks to kind of come up with a really specific sound palette, a really specific approach, little melodic fragments and harmonic movement that is significant or that can build on itself. So I guess it's the connection with the filmmakers that's been really a meaningful thing for me.
Mm-hmm. You bring up traveling to different places, and that brings up a point about the film, which is that it has this wonderful sense of place. This upper East Coast fishing town. Was the setting an influence in the music that you wrote at all, or?
It was, and it was also an influence on the performance practice and the production approach. For instance, like I said, it kind of went back to these Puritan, 17th century melodies, and I didn't really even think that much about it. But after I started working on it, and Kenny and I were collaborating and talking, I realized, oh, this makes sense, because there's something in that, beginning over again, and there's something in that music that where you just simply keep going. That I think works in the melodies. There's something about the harmonies that cycle and the melodies that cycle, and so there's this really deep, shadowy feeling of place in the inspiration of the choral music. And then in terms of the actual visual energy of the landscape, in terms of production, some of the a cappella music I recorded. Well, actually, I worked with my daughter on those pieces. She is the singer. She's a young opera singer. And I wanted to play them for Kenny, and I heard her voice when I was working on them. So she was in a dorm room at university where she's studying opera, and connect. And there's something in the intimate quality of her dorm room that was acoustically extremely satisfying, and we could catch every breath. And for that music, it's really great for the scenes where we're up close with Lee or Patrick, where Lee's in his car, or where Patrick is walking to his father's funeral, and we are kind of really close to these characters alone in the shot. But then for the opening, where you have the ocean and this sense of place, and then you see this little boy and Lee on this boat, and they look so small in the ocean. For that, further down in the process, I recorded her and my daughter again, Jacoba, in a very large concert hall, so we could get a real sense of the epic quality of that space and of the sea. So yeah, and also with the strings and everything, I really thought about matching the space with the kind of quality of those shots, the expansive sort of a feeling of that it's sort of an infinite space, and it's an infinite thing that's happening to him.
What's extraordinary too is that, it's a very grim movie in places, especially, if you just read a plot description, it may sound very depressing, but there's a lot of humor in it as well. There's a lot of pathos in it, and it's very truthful. It all kind of comes from the truth of the situation. Can you talk a little bit about that and your role in that?
Yeah, I think in terms of just the tone of the music, that in places the music, even though it's simple and hymn-like, there's complications in the harmonies. There's a little bit of, and there's a shifting between darkness and light in the music. I think that, for instance, if I think about it in terms of performance practice, with the strings, there's a sense that at the beginning that there's a surface that's quite still and kind of cool, a little bit cold and a little bit dark, but really at the same time strangely warm and huge, you know. So and then over the course of the film, over the cues that as I recorded them, the sound opens up, it becomes more active, and then at the end we have a bigger string sound. So I mean, I can talk about it specifically that way. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but quite often these things happen when you're scoring, and then afterwards you can make sense of them. You know, at the time you're just simply, there's a lot of time pressures, and you're kind of reacting to it in a really intuitive way.
Right. Yeah. No, that did answer the question, actually. No.
Yeah.
Because I guess what I was getting at is the fact that the movie does such an extraordinary job of balancing these tones and being truthful in every moment. And there are moments where it is very sad, but also moments where it's funny, and you know, just like in life. And your music plays a large role in helping to balance that tone.
Well, the only thing I would say that I just thought of now, but you can't really hide in Kenny's films. Like, you can't do a cue that doesn't have a truth to it, and you can't just think, oh well, you know, these cues, these pieces of music are working. It's okay if I just put that one in there and it didn't quite work in that bar, or, you know, I played the piano a little too sweetly, but no one's going to notice. I guess it's getting back to what I was saying before. Like, in Kenny's films, you have to sort of get it right, and it's interesting because sometimes you're not sure how that's going to happen, but you can feel it when it's connecting in the right way with the strength of his storytelling.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great movie. Lesley, thank you so much. Congratulations on your work. It was a pleasure
Thanks
talking with you. You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks.